Hi, I'm Lori Talarico, and I'm a professor here at Bergen Community College. And I'm really proud to be able to say that because the journey it took me to get here was long and hard and really a bit unusual. So I'd like to tell you my story. I'm the oldest of 6, and by the time I was 9, there were 5 girls and 1 boy. My last sister came along 3 years later. We had it tough and we were poor. My parents did the best they could, but we were always hurting financially. We wore a lot of hand-me-downs and ate a lot of that awful orange log cheese in a box that the churches give out. Until this day, I gag at the thought of drinking that chalky powdered milk. It was through the generosity of my grandmother and others that we always had enough. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized all we hadn't had. My parents really did work hard, but life was harder. I learned how to take care of a home and kids, cook, clean, and iron quite early. In addition, I also played the part of confidant and counselor for my parents' woes quite often. My grades were really erratic. They went from great to just passing, sort of reflecting the ups and downs of my home life. Except for math. I was always terrible at math, and I considered myself quite stupid because of it. No matter how much I studied, I didn't get any better. There was one place, though, where I got to be just a kid, drum and bugle corps. My parents allowed me to join, and I learned to play the drums at a very early age. My dad had been a drummer in high school, and he passed the sticks on as soon as I was able to hold them. I stayed in drum corps all the way through high school. Going to high school was a really big deal in my family. No member of my family had gone to high school or beyond the 8th grade until my parents. And I am only the second person in my family to graduate high school. Until this day, I am the only person in my entire family with a master's degree. They just didn't understand the value of an education. My grandfather was so old school from Italy that he actually encouraged my dad not to spend any money on his daughter's education because they should be thinking about marriage. Thankfully, my parents didn't listen to him. Throughout high school, everybody said to me, "Go to college," but no one in my family did anything to make that happen or to guide me in that pursuit. I didn't even look at catalogs, visit schools, or apply. I think it was more of a fantasy for all of us than a reality. Besides that, I didn't really think I was smart enough to go either. I always had a really hard time with math, and in high school I failed geometry and had to go to summer school. I remember till this day that teacher telling me, "You really should enroll in the secretarial program because you are definitely not college material." Luckily, I didn't listen to her either. Sadly, I never reflected on the fact that at the same time I was bad in math, I was taking advanced placement English classes in both junior and senior year. That means I was eligible for college credit while I was still in high school. I really had very low self-esteem and obviously very poor guidance. To make matters worse, my grandmother, who I loved dearly, died suddenly in my junior year. I lost all incentive to care about anything for a long while, and college wasn't even on my radar. Looking back, I realized I was really depressed, and I did a lot of things I'm not proud of. My grades slipped dramatically in the end of the junior year and all of my senior year, and I became really confused and defiant. I didn't care about college, and I graduated without a plan. Even though my friends were saying, "You're really smart, you should be going to college," I didn't believe it. There were so many other issues and dysfunctions going on at home that upon graduation, at the age of 17, I ran away from home, again without a plan. First, I stayed in the basement of a friend's house for a few weeks. I then spent several months living in a commune. That was an interesting experience. At some point, I stayed with some other friends. For money, I did anything I could offer on the books. I cleaned and painted houses, did yard work, walked dogs. I went into a pet store before it opened in the morning to clean out litter boxes. I was a chambermaid at a local Holiday Inn, and I made fancy deli platters for a catering company. I was really lost. At that point, I decided to come to Bergen and take a couple of courses. But after the first few weeks, I never came back. I didn't think I fit in, and I wasn't doing the homework. Hanging out with friends and getting buzzed still seemed more important at the time. I realize now that I was still really depressed and still missing my grandmother terribly. No one really cared that I didn't continue with school, but somewhere inside, a little part of me was disappointed. I don't know what I was thinking I was going to become. I was in total denial. Shortly after, I visited a high school friend in Boston and fell in love with that city. I moved there at the age of 19, and after drumming in a jazz band for a while, I applied to Berklee College of Music. Amazingly, I received a partial scholarship to study composition. That was my plan. Little did I know that in my second semester, I would wind up having emergency surgery and lose my scholarship because it took too many months for me to recover. So that's the second college I left without finishing. I applied for food stamps and worked off the books making cupcakes in a local bakery. I gigged on the side and did some studio work and voiceovers, but nothing steady. And at the same time, I was desperately trying to put a band together. And I did. I spent the next 7 years playing the Boston circuit with my all-girl band, All That Glitters, which I also managed. Sure, we made money, but not steady. And we played in a lot of creepy and even sometimes dangerous places, the kind you'd never tell your parents you'd been to. At some gigs, we took our breaks in the bathroom and locked the door just to be safe and not harassed. Meanwhile, my friends were getting married and having families. They were done with school and making decent money. I was starting to feel like I needed more, much more in my life. I'd been fantasizing that maybe I could be a writer. I'd been writing the lyrics to all of our original songs, and I wrote all the business and promo pieces. I started to remember how much I enjoyed writing in high school, even though I hadn't thought I was good enough. So that dream started to grow, and I was gaining confidence. I was letting go of the fantasy of being in a famous girl band and dreamt of going back to school. So at 26, I made a major decision to move back to Jersey and begin a new life. Good old Jersey. Wound up driving for a courier service because I couldn't find any other work without a degree. Luckily, I was so poor, I was accepted to a government program, CETA, where I trained to be a secretary. A practical job. Everybody was happy but me. I hated every minute of it, but I did learn some great skills. One day, the counselor there suggested I apply to work at a college so I could get free tuition, and I ended up here at Bergen. I finally had a plan. I spent my days as a secretary, but I took as many classes as possible at night. 4.5 years later, I was in my final semester and had already been accepted to a 4-year school. Then it happened. I actually failed my statistics class and couldn't graduate. I was devastated. Worse yet, I had already quit the secretarial job. This time I didn't give up, and I sought help. Dean Marshall found me a decent part-time job at a law firm where I got to learn some new skills. I enrolled in statistics once again that fall. I was now 30 years old. I worked my butt off and wound up with a B. While working hard in my math class, I got a call from a Bergen career counselor about a possible transfer scholarship. She encouraged me to apply. Columbia University? I had never heard of it, and I wasn't even going to consider it. It was in the city, and I thought the commute was too far. I didn't know anyone there, and no one in my family thought it was much of a big deal anyway. I hadn't even known what an Ivy League school was. The counselor insisted, and I applied. I was called in for an interview and amazingly won the Helen Hull Writing Scholarship and started that January. Life would never be the same. I was like a sponge making up for years of intellectual drought. I read everything I was assigned and more. I learned a lot in class, but my biggest lessons were by far more personal. Never had I realized all the ideas, people, and places I'd never been exposed to before. Never had I thought about analyzing art or literature or how much bigger the whole world is. It changed me for the better, and I came to understand that knowledge is power, and people really respect those who can articulate themselves intelligently. And me, I was writing about the musicality in Milton's Paradise Lost, and understanding how to discover a palimpsestic plot. And I even got a B in a math class at Columbia after a lot of hard work. I had truly found myself. When I walked down the aisle to get my bachelor's degree, I can sincerely say that I really felt smart for the first time in my life. I also knew that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life going from one crap job to the next, always scraping by. I had the honor of continuing at Columbia's Teachers College for my master's degree on a partial scholarship, and I appreciated every minute of it. I majored in the teaching of writing. Was it hard? You bet, but it was exciting. And I knew at last that I had finally found my calling, teaching and writing. No longer would I have to work so hard for so little. No longer would I have to work and go to school at the same time. And so, upon graduation, I found myself on the other side of the desk. So now, when I'm standing in the classroom and I hear you talk about struggling, I really do get it. I know what it means to struggle. So please don't assume that I can't understand and I can't help. And I also know that struggle can pay off. And sometimes what looks like an ending can be the start of a wonderful beginning. So go for it. You might just change your life for the better. Thank you.